Prepared for the U.S. Open, but also to try to win a golf tournament, that would be something that would give me a positive thing towards what I want to do.
Players who aren't as happy with some of the outcomes, I think they understand why, and they understand why we're doing it and for the greater good of the PGA Tour and the game.
We are just organized now in a more simple understanding competitively so our fans can understand it. The motivation to go for big markets is not that complicated. We're hearing that from partners and we're hearing that from fans.
Golfers are selfish. They have to be. You've got to be considerate about what you're doing and what you're doing.
The game needs to be strong. The fields need to be strong. The competition needs to be its best. That's what fans want.
The professional golf world has survived 3 years of bitter civil war, billions of dollars in outside investment, and a total restructuring of its traditional competitive model. But it has just run headfirst into its most formidable obstacle yet, an 86-year-old man with 18 major championships, nothing left to prove, and absolutely nothing to fear. When Jack Nicklaus stepped to the microphone at Muirfield Village for his annual pre-memorial tournament press conference, everyone in the room expected the usual warm nostalgia and stories of the Golden Bear's legendary career. Instead, Nicklaus delivered a devastating public broadside against the PGA Tour's newly appointed CEO and incoming commissioner, Brian Rolapp. The confrontation did not happen in a dimly lit boardroom or behind closed doors. It happened in front of the global media and a locker room of 47 players who watched the ultimate custodian of golf's traditions systematically dismantle the corporate philosophy of their new leader. It was a moment that stripped away the polite, diplomatic facade of professional golf and exposed a raw structural civil war that is quietly tearing the sport apart from the inside. To understand why this moment shook the foundations of the sport, one must understand the corporate revolution that Brian Rolapp brought with him from the National Football League. Rolapp, who spent over 2 decades as the NFL's chief media and business officer, was brought in as PGA Tour CEO in 2025 to salvage a sport drowning in political chaos and fracturing viewership. By June of 2026, the PGA Tour Policy Board had formally approved Rolapp to succeed Jay Monahan as the 5th commissioner in tour history, with his term formally commencing on January 1, 2027. Rolapp's mission was simple: run the PGA Tour like a major American sports league. His signature reform was a radical 2-tier system designed to compress the competitive season, maximize media rights, and pit the absolute best players against each other more often.
I think what drew me to this job is the strength of golf is a worldwide game, but also the strength of the PGA Tour.
The first day of the job, but division remains a distraction in our sport. The fans and fan forward said they want reunification.
Complex situation. I think no less than 2 sovereign nations are involved in this discussion, so it's not easy.
Under this new model, scheduled to debut in 2028, the tour would be split into 2 distinct tracks: a premier championship series featuring massive $20 million purses, and a secondary challenger series functioning under a strict promotion and relegation format. This was a blueprint drawn up not on a golf course but on a spreadsheet in Ponte Vedra Beach, designed to appeal to television networks and private equity firms who demand highly polished, predictable entertainment packages. But Rolapp's hyper-efficient, data-driven schedule required jamming the biggest events into a highly compressed 6-month window. This created a logistical nightmare of back-to-back high-stakes tournaments, leaving historic, non-signature events completely exposed. It was precisely this corporate squeezing of the calendar that pushed Jack Nicklaus over the edge.
It's really about organizing the PGA Tour in a way that's a little bit more simple, sports fan can understand, as opposed to how do you actually organize this into a little bit more coherent league or sport.
The game needs to be strong. The fields need to be strong. The competition needs to be its best. That's what fans want. I think one thing the NFL's taught me is just when you think you're successful, that's when you really need to start looking at things and change again.
Speaking from the media center of the tournament he founded, the Golden Bear did not mince words, stating plainly that he was not in favor of what the tour was doing. Nicklaus pointed directly to the Cognizant Classic in Florida, an event deeply tied to his own Nicklaus Children's Healthcare Foundation, as the prime example of a historic tournament being systematically starved of oxygen. Squeezed relentlessly between Pebble Beach, Tiger Woods' Genesis Invitational Bay Hill, and the Players' Championship, the Cognizant Classic was left with almost no chance to attract a competitive field. By prioritizing a handful of elevated, high-paying corporate dates, the new leadership was effectively turning traditional community-based tournaments into forgotten low-tier afterthoughts. The tension escalated rapidly when Nicklaus transitioned from defending individual tournaments to diagnosing the severe physical and mental toll of Rolapp's compressed calendar on the players themselves.
When Phil saw me at Augusta, he says, I'm looking forward to Muirfield this year. He says, I really got to learn the golf course during the President's Cup. He said it was self-prepared for the U.S. Open, but also to try to win a golf tournament. That would be something that would give me a positive thing towards what I wanted to do. He was saying that, he felt bad about not being able to be here.
Drawing from his own unmatched experience, the Golden Bear explained that even at the peak of his physical prime, playing more than 2 or 3 weeks in a row made it impossible to maintain the focus and energy required to play elite golf. Under the new system, elite players would be forced to grind through grueling multi-week stretches of high-pressure signature events just to maintain their standing in the premier tier. Nicklaus warned that this structure would inevitably lead to severe player burnout, injuries, and a visible decline in the quality of competition. By treating professional golfers like NFL players who can be scheduled for weekly high-impact performances without a break, the tour's new corporate architects were ignoring the fundamental reality of how golf is played and won. It was a system that valued television inventory over human endurance. And Nicklaus was the only person with enough cultural capital to say it out loud.
I felt like I'm maybe not the best and most objective person to determine how good I was. I said, who was your toughest competitor? I says, it's me. Golfers are selfish. They have to be. You've got to be considerate about what you're doing and what you're doing. It's like everybody says, when you come up to 18, how can you handle the pressure? I says, what do you mean handle the pressure? That's the fun.
What made the confrontation truly humiliating for the new commissioner was the deafening silence that followed. Reports quickly surfaced of a subsequent gathering at Muirfield Village where Rolapp, standing before dozens of PGA Tour players, chose to deflect and remain silent when pressed on the exact scheduling conflicts Nicklaus had highlighted. For the 47 players in attendance, the message was unmistakable. The modern PGA Tour was no longer a player-run organization where legacy and tradition guided the way. Instead, it had become a media property managed by executives who viewed the historic tournaments of the Florida Swing as mere chess pieces on a broadcast calendar.
The motivation to go for big markets is not that complicated. We're hearing that from partners and we're hearing that from fans. Scarcity means a dramatic cut in the number of events.
Make sure you have the best product as possible. Make sure that you're responsive to the changing landscape in media. First step, we're just finishing, which is just get the model and the competitive model right so you know what you're actually going to be in the market with.
The silence from the executive podium only solidified the locker room's growing realization that they were no longer being consulted on the future of their own sport. They were simply being told how it was going to be. They stood along the walls of that meeting room, watching the greatest living legend of the sport plead with a corporate executive who could not or would not offer a single word of defense for the system he was building. The immediate fallout of this scheduling crisis has already begun to disrupt the traditional summer calendar, proving Nicklaus's warnings correct in real time. Just weeks after the meeting at Muirfield, the historic Charles Schwab Challenge at Colonial, a tournament that has stood as a cornerstone of the professional golf calendar for 80 years, suffered an unprecedented blow when 4 of the biggest stars in American golf simultaneously withdrew from the field. Scottie Scheffler, Jordan Spieth, Wyndham Clark, and Brooks Koepka all announced they would not be competing. To the casual viewer, these looked like isolated individual decisions based on personal scheduling fatigue. But inside the locker room, it was widely understood as a silent, passive-aggressive mutiny against the tour's compressed summer stretch. The top players are beginning to realize that under Rolapp's new model, they are being treated as corporate assets rather than independent competitors.
Coming into this job with a blank sheet of paper, I think there's a lot of opportunity here, but I think I'm going to learn. Growth of the PGA Tour and the growth I think we can have with some increased innovation, I think that's going to be my primary focus.
Next time I go to the media market, how do I make sure I have the most compelling product for fans and for our media partners? If you are in the sports business, it behooves you to put your house in order as much as possible.
This scheduling squeeze does not just exhaust the elite, it directly damages the livelihood of the tour's middle and lower class players. When Brooks Koepka withdrew from Colonial, the late timing of his decision triggered a cascade of administrative consequences that illustrated the systemic flaws of the new system. Under the tour's newly revised field size rules, Koepka's late withdrawal did not result in his spot being filled by an alternate on the driving range. Instead, the tournament field was simply reduced, leaving alternates Zach Blair and Patrick Fishburne completely out in the cold. These are players fighting for their cards, fighting to earn FedEx Cup points, and fighting to maintain their livelihoods in an ecosystem that is rapidly closing its doors to anyone outside the top 50.
Rory McIlroy expressed some concern about this new two-tier system. Have you heard more pushback from the players?
Players who aren't as happy with some of the outcomes, I think they understand why, and they understand why we're doing it and for the greater good of the PGA Tour and the game. We knew as much as golf is growing, as much as the PGA Tour is growing, we could be better.
By designing a tour that exists solely to serve the TV ratings of 30 elite stars, the incoming commissioner is actively dismantling the very competitive ladder that allowed players like Scheffler, Spieth, and Nicklaus himself to rise to greatness in the first place. This philosophical clash exposes the central rift in modern professional golf. On one side stands Brian Rolapp, armed with TV ratings, demographic data, and a mandate to deliver maximum value to media partners and private equity investors who expect a return on their billions. He represents a modern sports business landscape where tradition is a liability and efficiency is the only metric that matters. On the other side stands Jack Nicklaus, representing a lifetime of belief that golf's true value lies in its history, its charitable impact on local communities, and a meritocracy that cannot be easily packaged into a TV-friendly franchise model.
What's the one question you've not been asked, but that you want to answer?
No, I'm not going to answer that because I don't have a clue. And when you get physical problems, then you try to play with them and they keep getting more physical problems, then it gets between your ears and that's very difficult to get out of there.
I worry about what I can control. I think the momentum the PGA Tour has is great.
We are just organized now in a more simple understanding competitively so our fans can understand it.
By standing up and publicly challenging the incoming commissioner, the Golden Bear gave voice to a silent majority of players, sponsors, and fans who feel the soul of the PGA Tour is being traded away for quarterly financial reports and media rights extensions. As the PGA Tour marches toward its radical 2028 restructuring, the silence that hung in that meeting room at Muirfield Village will be remembered as the exact moment the old world and the new world officially collided. It was the moment the players realized that the Player Advisory Council was a corporate fiction, and that the decisions regarding their careers, their schedules, and the legacy of their sport had already been made in high-rise offices far away from the fairways. Jack Nicklaus did his part. He stood up, spoke the truth, and forced the new commissioner to show his hand, even if that hand was empty. The question that remains is whether the 47 players who witnessed that silence will continue to stand along the walls, or if they will finally find their voices and demand that the integrity of the game be protected before the spreadsheet wins once and for all.